Hi friends, have you heard the story of Jonah? It's sort of a fun story. The story goes like this. Jonah was living in the land, doing his thing, and God said, hey, I need you to go preach to your neighbors and enemies in Nineveh that I'm going to destroy their city. And Jonah was like, that's a terrible idea. So instead of going to Nineveh, he got on a ship sailing in the other direction. While he was sailing, a huge storm came up, and the sailors apparently were pretty superstitious folks, and they tried to figure out whose fault this was. They found out that it was Jonah's. So Jonah offered to them that if they threw him off the ship, the storm would go away, which appears to be true. So they threw him off the ship, and then a big whale ate him, and he sat in the belly of the whale for 3 days. Most of the time when I hear the story of Jonah, this is the part I hear about. While in the whale, Jonah prays, asks for forgiveness, and then gets spit out on the land, actually sort of close to Nineveh. Having now been convinced that God is not going to let this go, Jonah goes to Nineveh and preaches and walks from side to side of the city saying, God is upset with you, God is not happy with the way that you're living, you need to change what you're doing or God is going to destroy you. At the end of this, the people of Nineveh repented. They stopped eating, they put on different clothes, they prayed, they asked for forgiveness. Their king, in fact, was the leader among this. And so God, being God, changed God's mind and said, you know what, I'm not going to destroy Nineveh after all, because you all have done what I've asked of you. Jonah got a bit of upset about this. He was like, why'd I have to come here and say all this stuff if you're not even going to follow through? This is not the nicest thing I've ever heard. So he goes to a hill outside of Nineveh and he sits there to pout. And the thing you have to remember is that all the Bible stories happen in places that are really hot. They're deserts and it's sunny and it's sandy and it's hot and it's miserable. And so while Jonah is sitting there pouting, a tree-like thing grows and creates shade, and it's so much nicer. He's really grateful. He likes this plant a lot. And then, the story says God caused this to happen. Then a worm eats through the base of this plant, and the whole thing dies. It withers, and then Jonah is exposed to the elements again, and Jonah is distraught. He says that he wants to die. He's so upset that this plant has died. At which point, the story says God responds, how is it that you can be upset unto death for one plant, but be upset with me, that I would be distraught for the destruction of an entire city? As I have compassion for the city, I wish that you would as well, and not just for the plant. Now, I'm not sure the story of Jonah happened exactly, which is okay, but I do think it teaches us a lot. In fact, I think it's probably in the Bible to teach us that God cares about our enemies, including our enemy cities, and that God's nature is one of mercy and not destruction. I think this is actually a story to tell us that God doesn't go and destroy cities on purpose. That's not how God works. But it also manages to remind us that sometimes we miss the big picture. And the big picture is always God's love for all people, and not always the thing that makes us comfortable. You probably knew that though. You're smart. Will you pray with me? God, we thank you for the stories like those of Jonah that give us a lot to think about and many ways to grow. Amen.